G'day everyone and welcome to another edition. Whoops, what have I done here? Have I muted myself? No, I haven't muted myself. G'day everyone. Welcome to a finals edition, the week one finals edition of the weekend wrap for 2025, 2024. How am I going? Pretty good. Obviously no Crows during the finals, but plenty to talk about and a bit of news around the trap. So without any further ado, why don't we just crack straight in, shall we? Macca, where are you, mate? I've just lost you for a minute there. I'm sure I'll find you again. How you going, mate? All right? You had a rough start to proceedings?
Oh, yeah. I don't know why. I did the usual thing, but you said no vision. Went back, had to wait for the bloody thing to reboot itself, and we're here.
You're looking a bit big on my screen. I might have to just make it a little bit smaller because you're only a rover and like.
Yeah, well, I am adaptable.
There you go. I'll just move you around so you don't look like a bloody alien. You still look like a little kid at the bench. We're going to have to work on that over the off-season, Macca. Get your camera sorted out. You need to be a little bit further away from your camera.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's all right. We'll deal with that later. In the meantime, how'd you find the week one of the finals, mate? Pretty a good start, although only one real close match, I would have thought.
Yeah, look, it was tension free. It's one thing, and when you don't have a team play, you don't have that tension that you normally have, and I missed it. That fire in the belly, you know. The hope for a win or the anger you're going to have afterwards, whatever it's going to be, I missed that. But look, there was a mixture of games. I thought the Sydney GWS game was absolutely outstanding for quality football. Yeah, well, the rest of the games I don't think measured up to that by a long chalk. But Port Adelaide, pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. That's always a bit of a humour in Adelaide, of course, when they do. They laugh when we lose, and we sort of smile pleasantly when they lose.
Mate, they were pitiful. Look,
they were. And I suppose when you look, it was probably really unrealistic to think that they could win. If you have a look at, for example, the way that the dice rolled, first of all, Houston, who's an all-Australian halfback or back pocket player, wherever he plays, he can play anywhere. He's an outstanding player. He wasn't playing. Their next outstanding backman, where he unfortunately did his leg in, and he's a beautiful kick. What's his name?
You're telling the story, mate.
Yeah, Farrell.
Yeah.
That's of their backline. There's the two class kicks gone for a start, and also they're high position getters as well. And on top of that, they have got some crap in their side. I don't care what anybody says; they've got crap. When you look at when you're playing blokes like Dixon, who got 3 possessions, Francis Evans, he had 6. McIntyre, he had 6. They're not AFL football, so really. We've had 2 classy ones out. You're playing those 4 duds. That's 6 of them. Then their midfield didn't fire, and on top of that, Stewart dropped out for Geelong, which was a blessing in disguise because Holmes has been their best midfielder all year. But when Stewart came in the midfield, he got shoved out onto a wing and a half-back flank. Well, with Stewart dropping out, he went back in the middle and started, and he had very good company with Dangerfield.
Without you going into the whole match replay, can we just stick to the format? You've just gone right into it, mate. Come on.
I know. Sorry, mate. I just got a bit carried away there.
Yeah, you did. but that's okay. That's okay.
I
Look,
was on a roll too.
I'll put you out of your misery and let's go straight into the weekend results, shall we? Because we just can't hold you back, can we? And it was Macca, the Cats 2018 138, getting up in the first qualifying final on Thursday night over Port 7-12-54. Now continue.
Yeah, as I was saying, firstly, they had their two class players out in the back line. Then on top of that, they're playing four duds on top of that. Then you got Butters gets a bloody elbow or something to the ribs, and he was dead set useless. Rosie is not a captain's arsehole. He's not a leader. He's a good player, but he's not a leader.
Oh, relax, relax. He's a kid. Relax, Macca. Just tone down the rhetoric a little bit. He's a kid. He's 22 years old, for God's sake.
And that's what I'm saying. I don't think he's ready to be captain yet. That's my point.
That's different to saying he's not a captain's arsehole.
At this stage, I should have said. And then
let's just tone that down a little bit, shall we?
Right, then rolling on. As I said, they've got four players in there that shouldn't be in there, in my opinion, because they're not AFL footballers. On the other hand, it's one of those things. Geelong, they really fired. Cameron, wouldn't you love to have a player like Cameron in your side? That guy is just a freak. What about that first goal he kicked, Feed?
Oh, when he kicked that first goal, I thought, oh, Porter in trouble here. Yeah. That was a bad omen.
It was, wasn't it? Then you got Stengel, who he did the dirty on us, and he started. But when you look for Port, also the coaching, Horn Francis, why would he be for 7.5 minutes, 8 minutes sitting on the sideline at the start of each quarter? I mean, he's an impact player. So, I just think it was a real mess by Port Adelaide. I thought their side first they were weakened by the loss of two players. I agree with that, but they don't have any depth. That's what really showed quite clearly, and it also showed what I've always said. They've had an adequate back line. They've had a very good midfield, and they're pretty weak up forward. This time the midfield didn't fire. The defence wasn't adequate, and then they got an absolute hammering. And that's what you get when all the parts don't work.
I mean, I've said for quite a while that they just won't score enough goals in big games, and if their tactic was to try and limit Geelong's scoring to under 10 or 11 goals, then they were always going to be up against it because, as you mentioned, Macca, with their two key defenders out, or not key, but like their two prime movers out across half back, it was going to be very difficult for them. And, it was actually Geelong's smalls that did them in. Geelong's ball movement was very, very quick, very slick. They took the first option every time. They weren't afraid to just bundle the ball forward in the path of a teammate. But I thought there was a pretty key moment, Mac, when Port actually got in front halfway through the second quarter, or, early, mid in the second quarter. It was on the back of Geelong getting into the trap, falling into the trap of kicking down the line, which is often what teams do to them. And for a 5 or 10 minute period there, Port were able to stifle them across half back because Geelong were just going up and down the line. And as soon as they corrected that and started moving the ball and changing lanes across the ground and kicking shorter and chipping through and using a bit more handball, Port had absolutely no answer to that. And it's a credit to the players because that happened before the halftime break that Geelong corrected that. And so that's the players bringing it on themselves to change up what they were doing. No input from Chris Scott whatsoever. And once they corrected that and stopped playing into Port's hands, that was it, game over. And it was very interesting. Geelong at the moment are playing very much a Crows circa 215 to 217 game plan, where they're pushing everyone up, running the ball hard, and then just beating them back to goal. It's very reminiscent of the Crows, 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
It's got Rahili written all over it, hasn't it?
Well, if he's a common denominator, I'm not sure whether Riley was at the club when we were doing that, but because that was sort of the Pike era, Mac, sort of that 2015 to 2017 sort of game style when we still had Jenkins and all that, and we had the two smalls in Cameron and Betts, but they're playing very high at the moment. Cameron's playing quite high at the moment. They hardly use a second tall option at the moment up forward. It's just all pushing the ball forward, and then beating them back over the back. And Chris Scott was quite open about it. He admitted it in the commentary when they interviewed him.
Well, somebody said in the chat, and quite rightly so, they look better without Hawkins. Hawkins lumbers around, and as you say, they really only played with one tall up forward, and with everybody sort of charging forward into that open space, so they didn't really need it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a different style of game. I mean, when you've got Hawkins up forward, you tend to look for him. But they've changed their game plan, they've adapted, and they've done quite well. Just a note, obviously, thanks to everyone who's joined us on Discord and on YouTube. Thank you very much to Ben, who's donated $5, and he said he would if we actually did a cast tonight, because he was doubtful that thought we were going to bail, Mac. So unfortunately my chat's not working tonight, so there's no chat coming up on the screen, and there's no interaction between the Discord chatters and the YouTube chatters, so I'm sorry about that, but what? And so you'll just have to chat amongst yourselves. My apologies for that. But thanks very much, Benny, for that $5. That's much appreciated. And of course, if you are on Discord, don't forget we're still running the live interaction. So if you want to come on and have your say, then go right ahead. Plenty of spots available. Now, Mac, the other thing that I want to talk to about before we get on to the next game is Mr. Dangerfield, who I thought was an absolute powerhouse in that game. The impact that he had with his touches, he had about 25 touches or whatever, but the impact that he had with those touches and the amount of goals that he was involved in setting up through sheer grunt and willpower, and we're talking about a 35-year-old bloke, and he was exceptional, I thought.
He turned the clock back about 7 or 8 years, mate. That's the sort of game he used to play at his peak. And, I mean, he's a little bit heavier now than he used to be, but he hasn't lost any pace, and he played it very physically when he attacked the ball. He was absolutely outstanding, and he really sort of carries the side on his shoulders in the sense like a captain should. That's what I was really getting at, the comparison there. He was so well supported by Holmes. Holmes was outstanding, and he's going to be a very good player in the long run. He's just a developing mid who's got lots of talent. And young Mano, when I say young Mano, I think he's 27 years of age, and they picked him up as a senior player, and Geelong have got this capacity to spot people like him, and he was outstanding. Normally hangs around the forward lines. They brought him into the midfield, and he picked up his 20-odd possessions as well. So, yeah, they absolutely dominated the midfield, and yet everybody thought that was going to be Port's powerhouse.
Yeah, well, it looked as if they came in underdone. Zach Butters obviously carrying a rib. Certain people quite critical of him for succumbing to that injury. Kane Corns in particular. Reckon he should have just played through the pain. Well, bloody... I know they're professional footballers, but depending on where you've got that rib injury, bloody rib pain is pretty hard to ignore. But probably shouldn't have played him. I think there was some talk about Horn Francis having some sort of a illness during the week or something like that may have been a reason why he was used a little more sparingly than normal. I'm not sure. Dixon was short of a run and was ineffective. And I know they didn't have a lot of options there because Marshall's not all that match fit either. So, it not only were they missing a couple, but also they had probably 3 or 4 players that were probably not right to go anyway.
No, that's true. But it shows that their depth isn't great, Glenn, because
100%.
Like players like McEntee, not worth 2 bob, and what's the other player, Francis Evans. I mean, players like that. They're just players that you do listen. They roll along to another club.
Yeah. So and that's been their tactic, mate, to invest heavily in the midfield. Aside from Rioli up forward, they didn't really have a lot. They moved Darcy Burn-Jones back, which was a bit of a desperate move to cover for those 2 lads, Marshall and Houston, but he's not a defender's backside, so sorry, Tree Man. That was never going to work, I didn't think. As we both said, Macca, I don't think they're strong enough, Port. I really don't.
They're not. No, they're not. And the other one that they mentioned that we haven't mentioned is Radaglia. I mean, he had the capacity, I think, to mess up everything he went near. He had one of those days that you just don't want to have. He was very poor.
Yeah, and it can be a bit like that. Let's just quickly look through a little bit of their stats sheet just to see what happened. They got absolutely pantsed in disposals, 368 to 288. Kicks and handballs. They just didn't get enough of the ball. They're only 4 down on inside 50s, but their inside 50s were pretty ineffective, Mac, and their disposal efficiency was under 70. But look at that efficiency inside 50. 37.7% inside 50 efficiency. You're just not going to win a game of football like that. Free kicks, you could say, were heavily in Geelong's favour, obviously 18 to 8, but I didn't feel like that had an influence on the game whatsoever. Port just weren't in it, so it was a bit hard for them to be influenced too much by that. Stoppages, they got towed up in hit-outs, they got a win in clearances, but again, I just didn't feel like they were able to do anything with those clearances. They were very one-dimensional the way they played. They wanted to get to the corridor, but Geelong knew that, so every time they did get into the corridor, it was rushed and it wasn't very effective, and Geelong seemed to control that area of the ground pretty easily. Centre clearances, Geelong won 17 to 12. Around the ground, it was 19 to 28. Contested possessions in Geelong's favour, 125 to 119. We love that number, don't we? Uncontested, they got destroyed by, 75 more uncontested possessions. It just shows you how much Geelong controlled the ball, Mac.
And they used it pretty well. Not just on occasions. I thought all night they used the ball very well.
They just changed lanes consistently. They did not allow Port's defence to settle or their zone to settle. They were always stretching the ground. They were always moving the ball wide from one side to the other, using those little diagonals apart from that little stretch. And you could see quite easily that was quite defendable when they were going up and down the ground in the early parts of the second quarter. But like I said earlier, as soon as they corrected that was all she wrote. Turnovers, Port weren't very clean at all. Possession, the match possession, that's one of the lowest possession rates for a match I've seen. 35% Port had, Geelong 47%. I've not seen a team get less than 45% of possession before. They just couldn't get their hands on it, Macca.
And I think it just reflects what I said, Fee, that they had a poor side in the sense that they had 2 stars out and 3 or 4 players are barely AFL standard, and it showed. Yeah.
Aerially, Geelong destroyed them again, probably indicative of that outside ball. They were getting 108 marks to 81, 22 marks inside 50, Mac. 22 marks inside 50.
Which is horrendous.
That's pretty high. Their season average is 13. 22 marks inside 50. Their season average in marks in general is 89. They got 108, so that tells you quite a bit. And defensively, tackles 54 to 47 in Port's favour. That was nothing. Tackles inside 50. Port's way 17 to 7. That's probably because it spent so much time in their bloody forward line, Geelong. Look, not a good read if you're a Port supporter. Not a good read at all.
Not at all. Not at all.
If you have a look, just quickly, I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but if you have a look just quickly at the team stats, you can just see that their midfield just didn't get much of it. Wines got 23, Drew got 21, Boat got 20, Horn Francis 18, Rosie only 16. And of course, Zach Butters in half of football only got 8. They just didn't have any prime movers. Geelong's main movers were Holmes 28, Zach Guthrie 27, Paddy with 24, Manor with 23, Myers with 21. They just moved the ball really well up and down the ground. Those Smalls got up, provided options, and Port just couldn't go with them.
They were in a different class, totally different class.
Yeah. All right, the next game, Mac, we had the right game. That's not the right
Hawthorn.
game. I've got them out of whack. Anyway, yeah, there we go. The Bulldogs, also disappointing in my opinion, 98-62, Hawthorn 14-15, 99, Hawks by 37 points. And I thought this one might be a bit closer, Mako.
I did before the start of the game. I thought this was a great test for the Hawks. That it's the Bulldogs had been in reasonably good form, and Bontempelli in good form, etc., etc. Treloar, and I thought, yep, this will be a real measurement of where Hawks are at. Well, if that's a measure of where they're at pretty high, because they absolutely swarmed all over the Dogs. I mean, the Dogs just were never really in the game, and they were never ever going to win the game. Once Hawthorn settled down, I just thought, Bontempelli had a good first quarter, but they really needed to get a safari search out for him. They couldn't find him in the second or third quarter, and seriously, and Treloar must have been with him, because you couldn't find him either. They dominated so much after the first quarter. You just knew the way that they played that they were going to win no matter what happened. Sicily was outstanding in the back lines. They had a bloke, I don't know if I'll get his name right, guy up forward. A bloke only playing his first few games. He kicked 3 goals. I'm sure they were out there. Casher, somebody or other.
That's Harry Deer's son you're talking about.
Yeah, Casher Deer.
Yeah.
Is that right, Casher?
Yeah. He kicked 3 goals, 4, could have had 7. And the Wiz obviously had 4. Look, Mac, we've said repeatedly on this podcast that Beveridge tends to try and outsmart himself, and I think to some degree he did again. Although they played Treloar carrying a calf, and he was ineffective. He's been one of their better players all season. Carrying a calf, shouldn't have played him. Especially a calf. Have you ever tried playing with a bloody calf strain? It's impossible. You got no power in your legs whatsoever.
No, never had a calf problem, so I don't really know. But I can imagine. I mean, that's where you get your power from and your drive from. So it'd be very hard to go. Hard to go. One really interesting thing is, Lloyd Meek, the ruckman. He towed English, absolutely thrashed him.
Yeah.
23 disposals, 46 hit-outs to English, 15 disposals, 21 hit-outs. I mean, he's absolutely slaughtered him. Now, Lloyd Meek, he was a trade from Freo to Hawthorn, but he was only the steak knives in the deal.
Yeah.
And what what state life he's proved to be. He's been outstanding in the last few weeks, eh?
He has been, and that's the sort that's the damage that a ruckman can do. It's not always going to be a ruckman's day, but if a ruckman can get on top and particularly impose themselves around the ground, which Meek did, and we've seen Grundy do it at times, and those sort of blokes, it can have a real impact on the game because it's like having an extra player. A lot of teams play on the basis that the ruckman really doesn't do a lot around the ground. So when they do, picking up 23 touches or whatever, that's not insignificant.
No, it's tremendously significant. When you add that to 46 hit-outs as well, it's an outstanding game. And yet he was part of the O'Meara trade, so it was a future second and him for O'Meara. And I'll tell you what, Hawthorn won that one hands down.
Yeah, well, Freo wouldn't mind having Meek at the moment. Well, wouldn't have minded having Meek in those last few games with Darcy going down, that's for sure.
Yeah, an interesting thing, I looked through Hawthorn's side, 9 players in that side have come from other clubs. So they've chosen very wisely who they've picked up, and they've got them all fairly cheaply as well. So, 9 out of 23 is a significant number.
Well, so here's my view on the Hawks, because they play such an exciting, engaging brand of football, and it's a bit like Collingwood last year. When you're up and everything's going well, everything that you do looks like a masterstroke. But at the moment, when you hear Sam Mitchell talk about the way he manages that group, and when you see the way that they play, with enthusiasm and a bit of swagger and all the rest of it, I actually think that Sam Mitchell might be the first coach in the AFL to really connect with the current generation of players that's come through. Because
I think
I don't think. I mean, Craig McRae probably had a more mature list at Collingwood last year, but even then they were up and about and all the rest of it. But when you have a look at the coaches around the AFL at the moment, I'm not sure whether there's too many that actually connect with the 18 to 22-year-olds in terms of the way they live their lives and what's important to them and how they express themselves. And, hats off to Sam Mitchell. There is one thing that I will say, though. A lot of people have been saying, wouldn't it be great if the Crows were able to do that instead of, dropping a kid like Rochelle for doing what he did the other day. I agree to an extent, and I'll be interested in your thoughts on this, because there was a key thing that I heard Sam Mitchell say. As long as you're not disrespecting anyone, he doesn't care how you act. As long as it's inward and as long as it's not disrespecting anyone else, then that's fine. And I think the key difference, not that I think Josh Rochelle deserved to be dropped for that last season, I think that was extremely poorly handled. But the big difference between what Rash did and what the Hawthorn players have been doing, the Hawks celebrate in amongst themselves. They get around themselves, they get around their own fans, all the rest of it. It's not abusive, it's not aggressive, it's not disrespectful to opposition players or fans, whereas what Rash did was disrespectful.
Yeah, the one exception is Ginnivan. He'd been out the night before to a hotel, and allegedly he said he'd only had a glass of water or a cool drink or whatever, and he copped plenty by some critics for being at a hotel, which is I think quite ridiculous because he went there for a meal.
I'm not sure what that's got to do with the point I was trying to make.
Well, the point I was trying to make is that during the game, when they kicked the goal, they looked like they had the game won. Gentleman went through this process of making out he's opening a bottle and pouring a drink and drinking it down. So
but that's not being disrespectful to anyone.
Maybe not disrespectful, but it's it is a carry-on though.
But that was
I know your point.
That was my point. That Sam Mitchell doesn't care what they do as long as it's not disrespectful to opposition players or fans or coaches or whatever. Him doing the pouring himself a beer. Answering his critics that didn't like him going out for a pub meal the night before. That's not disrespecting anyone.
No, you are right. I know Rash did go a bit further than that because he's actually aimed at, at the teeth of their supporters. Yeah. So, I mean, he did go, yeah, but he got very personal.
Well, he did it during the week, and then he doubled down on it during the game at a point where the game wasn't won. So, look, I don't agree at all with what Rash was dealt with in terms of dropping him. But that's, to me, the key difference between what we're seeing with Hawthorn and what some might say should be let go at Adelaide. And I think that's a pretty reasonable line to draw from Mitchell, to say, get around yourselves as much as you like. Take your selfies, interact with the crowd, interact with the fans, do all of that sort of stuff. But the moment you start disrespecting opposition players and fans and coaches and whatever, you leave yourself wide open, in my view.
Well, you do. And I think they were quite right to discipline him, but that should have been done, as usual. It should have been done in-house, not publicly, and it didn't warrant to be dropped for the game.
Correct.
That's what just
Correct.
like.
But getting back to the Hawthorn Bulldogs game, they just play with such speed and aggression. It's reminds me a little bit of how GWS were playing a few years ago, where they just move the ball in waves and all the rest of it. The difference is that they've got those small players up forward that just know where the goals are. They're doing this at the moment without Will Day, which is an obvious inclusion that they would make if he was available. And I think they're a sneaky chance to push deep, Mac.
Well, they are. You go on what you see, and they certainly weren't. For many of those kids, it was their first final, and rather than actually be scared of it, they actually embraced it and actually went really, really well. You take Colin McDonald, I thought he was outstanding, and he's only a youngster. Young Watson, I thought when they talked about pick 4, I thought they've taken a midget at pick 4. Who would do that? But Hawthorn did, and they're right. He kicked 4 goals. He was outstanding. So you're right, Glenn, that I think they've got the right coach and the right temperament to go a fair way.
Well, I think it's a very good example of how, there's a very small gap between good and not good AFL performances or AFL players. And, we spend a lot of time on this podcast, as do everyone else in podcast world and in the general media and whatnot, analysing kids and whether they're good and whether they're this and whether they're that and all that. And I think there's a lot to be said, Macca, for the old adage that a team of champions will beat a champion. A champion team will beat a team of champions more often than not. And what you've got at the moment with Hawthorn is a champion team. Same with Geelong the week before. Yep. They're a champion the day before. Champion team. Yes, they've got some standout players, but by and large, what gets them over the line is the way they work together as a team, the way they gel, the way they understand how each other plays, all that sort of stuff. You could say the same about Sydney, and we'll talk about them in a moment, who won a game that they never should have won. And that really is on the coach. And getting a team to gel like Longmire does, like Sam Mitchell obviously has, like Chris Scott's been able to do, that's where the value of your coach is. Forget about all the should he play this player over that player, how many minutes did this guy get. They're all part of it. But at the end of the day, if you can get your group singing it from the same hymn book and playing for each other, you're going to overcome a lot of talent deficiencies by doing. The Wiz is like 4'2". He should never get the ball at AFL level. And yet, he's an integral part of their thing. So that's what I think. I think that's an area where a coach can really, aside from tactics and game day and selection and all that, it's the ability to gel that group together and get them playing for each other that is almost invaluable.
Yeah, you made a comment before about Sam Mitchell being probably the coach that can understand this generation of player better than other coaches. And I think you're spot on there, Ben. He's not that long out of the game himself. He did a little bit of an apprenticeship and just at another club to pick up little bits and pieces from there. But he understands the players. He understands them as people, and that's why he's doing so well. It's man management.
Well, I think, and it's not as if he's letting them get off and do their own thing and not there's no control over it. I think what Mitchell would demand is a level of professionalism when it's required, but not sweating the small stuff about Ginnivan going to the pub for a pub meal. He left at half time of the Port game. He apparently had a couple of lemon squashes or waters or whatever. And as Mitchell rightly pointed out, half the team probably went out into a public place for tea that night anyway. It just so happens that Ginnivan went to a pub to have his meal.
Exactly.
But and this is where I think, Mitchell, I think would definitely be a hard taskmaster in terms of standards, because he was a very professional. He got the absolute most out of himself as a player. But I just don't think he's getting caught up in all the stuff around socials and all the rest of it, because I think he just gets it. He's just got to let that happen. And he's obviously put some guidelines around it in terms of, make sure that it's positive and it's team-oriented and all the rest of it. And they're loving life. And it's great to watch, to be honest with you.
Well, I must admit, I did enjoy the game. I really did enjoy the game. And the enthusiasm from the players just rubs off to you as a spectator when you're watching it.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's quickly just run through some stats on this game. Hawthorn, 84 more possessions than or disposals than Western Bulldogs. Another case of one team not being able to get hold of the ball enough to do any damage. Used the ball a lot by foot, 66 more kicks than Bulldogs. Inside 50s destroyed them, 59-39. Again, Bulldogs under 70% disposal efficiency, although not by much. It was free kick Hawthorn, not free kick Bulldogs this week, but I don't think, again, that had a huge influence. The Hawks won the hit-out battle, as you mentioned, Meek doing an excellent job there, but the Bulldogs actually won stoppages in both centre and stoppage clearances, Mac. So that's why I think a ruckman who doesn't win taps is not the end of the world. A ruckman who does nothing around the ground is useless. And that's why I tend to be critical of O'Brien, because I always say that when O'Brien's taking marks around the ground, he's far more valued, irrespective of what happens at tap work.
Yep.
You look at Max Gawn for Melbourne. Is he rated as a great ruckman because he wins more taps than the opposition, or because he has more impact on the game, taking marks and kicking goals?
Oh, he's good games though when he dominates around the ground.
Exactly. And I think that's what you need to look for in a ruckman, and I think that's why we struggle with O'Brien, because there aren't too many games where he's up and about enough to have that sort of an impact. What else have we got here? Contested possessions, 25 in favour of Hawthorn, 60 more uncontested possessions. So again, just playing keepings off, Mac. And I just finished saying that I hadn't seen a team get 35% possession in a game before, and here we are with the Bulldogs 33% possession for the game.
Yep.
That's unbelievable.
Yep. They were poor. They were very poor. And, and a lot of that goes back to their coach too, I think. I think he didn't coach well on the day.
Well, there was a comment on the Sunday Footy Show around, Beveridge not doing the squad justice. And, I mean, you could say that to a degree. I think look, they've got enough firepower. They've got some stars. They're pretty solid down back. I don't know what it is.
It's just them. Because you're quite right. If you look at it for manpower, their manpower's pretty well up there with all the other teams right up the top. They've got some very, very good players. They've got some star players. But it just doesn't quite gel.
It's. I mean, it must be set up or game plan or something. I mean, he was quizzed about Bontempelli spending time on the bench and not spending enough time in the midfield. Why? I do like Hinkley did it with Horn Francis. Beveridge did it with Bontempelli. The only explanation I can think of for those players not being involved at centre square and around the ground is injury. That's because why else wouldn't you have Bontempelli around stoppage?
Well, Bontempelli made a mockery of that theory, Fane, because he had 12 possessions for the first three quarters. He had 12 in the last. So when he was finally released onto the ball, so that makes a mockery of that.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to work out what Bevo's doing because he's not. He's already under pressure, and I think their late season form probably eased that pressure a little bit. But they got beaten at their own game by Hawthorn comfortably, convincingly. They got beaten at their own game.
Yeah, I really think they're a group that need a new voice. I think Beveridge would be very hard to play under. That's just my personal opinion, just watching the way what we see publicly, and then what we see in terms of moves he makes, etc. I just think he'd be difficult to play for.
Yeah, I don't disagree, mate. All right, the next one was the cracker, and it really was a cracker. Amazing. I didn't actually watch all the game, and I was watching the scores, and then I watched the last quarter, and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. The Giants in the end going down by 6 points to Sydney, 13-10-88 to 12-10-82. And, just you talk about a team that plays for themselves. There's another one in Sydney. They never give up, and they just play for each other.
They do. They certainly do. They've really got the right team attitude. Look, GWS, they really for 3.5 quarters, it looked like they were going to win the game. Their ball movement by hand was brilliant at times, and when they get it right, it's very, very hard to stop them. They move the ball from one end of the ground to the other very quickly, link up maybe 3 or 4 handballs, and then one kick, then a few more handballs, etc. And they were doing that, and Sydney were really struggling. And it was to their credit that they actually were still sort of in the game. That some of their real guns were quiet. Not Heaney. Heaney was outstanding all day, and was a match winner in the last quarter with not only he made that outstanding mark, but he was inspirational all around the ground. But Tom Green, he was so good. He was getting so much of the ball that you thought that Kelly was really starring as well, and it was a very high standard game, and you just thought there was just that edge going with GWS. But it was at that halfway mark of the last quarter when you thought there was about 2 goals for the difference, something like that, and you thought, yeah, GWS, they'll hang on here, they'll go on and win this. But then Heaney just took his game. He'd been playing great, but he just took it to another level again. He took a mark which should be the mark of the year, but it won't qualify because it's already been judged. And I do think they shouldn't judge it until after finals, because this was a brilliant mark, a really brilliant mark.
Just going back to the Bulldogs game, J&M, thanks yet again for another donation, mate. We really appreciate it. Sorry, my chat's not working. I'd feature it on the chat, but basically J&M says, speaking of midgets, rumour is Caleb Daniels wants to return home to South Australia. What are our thoughts? And thanks J&M. I appreciate all your support you give us.
I did actually read that, Bean, and my mind said, "Oh, I don't know. I mean, if you got him for nothing, yes, you'd take him, but I don't know that you would trade for him, Bean. What do you think?
Well, that's the only way you're going to get him.
Yeah. No, I don't know. What would he add to us?
Well, I have absolutely no interest in him personally. I don't think he adds anything. I don't think he fills a role that we currently have a need for. If we're not doing everything in our power to bolster our midfield at the expense of every other position on the ground, then we're not doing our jobs as list managers, in my opinion. There's just, we have got absolutely no need at this stage of the squad's development to think about anything else but the midfield. Caleb Daniel's not going to play midfield for us. He's barely going to play it. He's not going to play a defensive role for us. He's not going to play up forward for us. It doesn't seem at this stage, and it is early days, but we haven't dropped anyone off the list yet, so there's only one or two that are going to come off, so we're not going to have a huge amount of list spots anyway. Why the hell are you going to put Caleb Daniel in there?
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't.
I mean, he's been a very, very good player, and he's had a very, very good career.
Somebody's got that he's a free agent. Somebody says he's a free agent.
Yeah, but he still takes a list spot.
Well, obviously.
He takes a list spot, and I don't see us dropping too many off this year, and we'll delve into our list, at the end of the season a little bit more. But at this stage, we only got Sloan, who's a confirmed retirement. We know that Tex is going on. We know that Smith was coached into a trigger on his contract, so he's going on. There's been no delistings yet that I'm aware of. So we're not going to have that many list spots available. So it's going to be a squeeze, and therefore you make sure that you have room for the positions that you need the most of, and that's midfielders.
Yeah, well, traditionally, if you look back at our history, we it's either 4 or 5 is the number that we look at traditionally move on one way or the other, whether they be by trade or by retirement or by just delisting.
I don't want to go too much into this at the moment because we're just talking about Daniel, and I want to keep on the gains. But sorry, Matt, go on.
Well, no, so what I'm just really saying, I'm supporting your comment that there won't be a lot of spots because we don't do a lot. We normally only go 4 or 5.
Yeah, and we've got Welsh coming in. You would think we've got our pick 4, so. Caleb Daniel.
Neil Bullen?
Well, that's another one too. Neil Bullen has been not guaranteed a spot, but certainly considering we've already announced it on our website, it's only a matter of doing the deal. So there's a spot that is taken. So yeah, I've really admired Caleb Daniel. He's had a great AFL career through a bit of adversity. He's at the tail end of that career, and I don't think we're the right club. Port Adelaide might be the right club. They like looking for missing pieces.
Yes, they do. The missing piece.
Yeah.
They've had 27 of them so far.
Yeah. Anyway, getting back to the Swans Giants game, the moment in the last quarter that I was actually worried was when Callum. What's his name?
Callum Ward.
Callum Ward kicked that checky, and it just snuck him out to a two goal lead. And it just seemed to me that there was too much time still on the clock. There was 8 minutes to go, if I recall correctly, when he kicked that checky.
Yeah.
And they were 2 goals up, and I thought, does GWS think that they've just done enough now? And I'm not sure whether they played out the game. I think that mentally, when they got that buffer after that goal, because they got around Ward substantially, there's still 8 minutes of that game left to play. And it's not as if I think they put the cue in the rack, but I think mentally they stopped attacking and they tried to preserve what they had. And that, a team like the Swans, you just can't do that. It just lets them in.
Well, yes, and on top of that, I think you're right. I think they celebrated if they thought they did have it. But having said that, Heaney was not one to give up, and he was outstanding. And Warner, who had a very quiet first 3 quarters, he erupted in the last quarter and played in the quality football that he can. And those 2 guys really were the 2 that lifted them over the line and got them up. They should give Heaney a bloody knighthood the game he played. He's had a great season.
Cream always rises to the top, and he's he's just a jet, Isaac Heaney. He really is.
The interesting thing is he's always been played as a forward pocket, virtually almost a permanent forward with maybe a run once in a game on the ball. But this year he's been played as a midfielder all year. And we've showed what a quality midfielder he is. I always thought he was a little bit soft. And yet once he's been moved on... But once he's been moved on the ball, he's as hard as nails. He is really, really... Somebody quite rightly points out Papley fired in that last quarter too. He went insane. Yeah. Those three players just went berserk, and they were as if to say, no, you might think you're going to win this game, but no, it's going to be us. And they got up, as close as you can almost get, and it was a great game. There's always going to be a winner, always going to be a loser, and I think I'll stick my neck out, as I always do, and I'll say the winner I think the Premier will come out of those two. Even I haven't written GWS off for Premiership either through losing that game. I thought, it was a very high-quality game. I've always said for a long, long time, Sydney, my favourite to win the flag, but I think both the two Sydney side teams, I think they're the ones to beat for the flag.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly on form that's the case, Mac. I just wonder a little bit what that result will do to the Giants in terms of their confidence. They don't get the benefit of a week off now. They've got to back up again next week against Brisbane, which will be a tough game. That week off just to get those little niggles right is often the difference, and I just wonder whether they've just squandered their finals chances, just by switching off for that last quarter.
Well, they play their next game against Brisbane at Engie Stadium. Where the hell is that thing?
That's their home ground.
Is that what it's called?
Well, that's the sponsor, yeah, Engie.
Oh, I didn't realise that, and I thought, where the bloody hell's this place?
It's the place they've been playing ever since they started.
Why would you have a final there, Fiend? There'd be no bastard there.
Where do you want it to be?
Oh, I thought that, playing it on Sydney Oval, there was nothing wrong with that.
But it's on the SCG, it's not their home ground.
I do understand that. But I understand the right for a home ground. I do understand the right for a home ground. But it's going to be sort of be costly in terms of spectators.
Why?
Well, they don't. Well, they never get many in during the home and away season. So
what is it? Yes, they averaging around 10 or 11,000. But what makes you think they're going to get any more at the SCG?
Actually, somebody quite rightly says I'm sounding very VFL. So they're quite right. The crowd shouldn't matter. I'll take it back.
I'm just wondering what your logic is, because I don't see whether it's at the SCG or NG. I don't see what difference it makes. They'll get who they get.
Yeah, I was just thinking that they might, the bigger the crowd, the better. But look, I suppose.
But what makes you think they're going to get a bigger crowd at the SCG?
Because it's more central.
Come on, mate.
Well, look, it doesn't really matter. That was just a stupid comment because they deserved that.
It was pretty much a stupid comment.
But it didn't deserve punishment by death.
Well, I'm not gonna destroy you. I'm just gonna ridicule you. That's all.
Well, you've done that.
Yeah. I mean, look. At the end of the day, that's an argument that's 10 years old, because the AFL used to force clubs to play at certain grounds because of crowd size, and like GWS have earned the right to play a home final. So, and the configuration of the two grounds is vastly different, Macca. So, if I was GWS and the AFL said we want you to play at the SCG, I'd say stick it.
So the ground they're playing at is a much wider ground, is it?
Have you not watched any football this year?
A game or two.
Have
Everyone.
So you must know where the Giants play their home games in New South Wales.
I didn't know it was called this bloody stadium.
That's just a sponsor's name. Like GMHBA at Geelong.
Okay.
It's the same ground they've played all season at. It's a big wide ground. It's got nothing. It's got no resemblance to the SCG at all.
Oh, that's a fair comment.
Oh my goodness. All right, let's move on before we completely lose all credibility. So the team stats for the Sydney Giants game, as you'd expect, a fair bit closer than the other two games. 348 to 360 in the Giants' favour for disposals. Inside 50 is almost the same. Disposal efficiency almost the same. Efficiency inside 50 marginally in the Giants' favour. I thought Jesse Hogan had another reasonable game up until the end there. Free kicks pretty even. Hit-outs pretty even. Clearances even. Centre clearances, Giants on top. Stoppage, Sydney a slight advantage. Contested possessions, it was a very even game. Extremely even game. GWS had more of the ball. It just got down to sheer willpower, didn't it, Macca, in the end?
And by three guys. Three guys can't do it by themselves, but three guys can make it happen. And that was Heaney and Warner and Papley. Those three made it happen.
Warner's last quarter was outstanding.
It was, yeah. I think he had more possessions in that quarter than he'd had all game. He was just dominant.
Well, he had something like 8 clearances or something. It was just an absolute masterclass in that last quarter.
Yeah, but it was an excellent game to watch, and a couple of others you felt you wasted your time watching them, but this was a beauty.
Yeah, so the only thing that I would say is that a couple of the GWS players didn't probably fire as much of a shot as what you'd expect them to fire. Mac? Caniglio, I thought, was a bit quiet.
Quiet? I wondered what he was playing. And that's a serious question. I didn't spot him till the second quarter.
Yeah.
He had a very, very quiet one. I did watch the two free agents just to see what I thought of them. Cummins was
Perryman and Cummins, yeah.
Yeah, I thought Perryman looked the better of the two, quite frankly.
Different roles, though. Different roles.
I do. I understand that. But they've got a bloke called Peatling, and he's showing on the list on Footy Wire as being uncontracted. He is a midfielder, and he's a bloody good midfielder. And I don't know what the chance would be of getting him, but I'd be having a crack at him because he's been a marginal midfielder for them this year, but he's got a lot of going through when people are unavailable, and he's never failed when he's had the opportunity. And I don't know whether he'd be available, whether they've signed him up yet, but he should, because that list isn't quite 100% accurate yet on Footy Wire. But they're saying that about 5 Victorian clubs in West Coast are after him, and I'm not surprised because he played excellently again this week. He played much better than Caniglio did.
Yeah, Caniglio was quiet, and it's a good spot on Peatling. He's bobbed up. It's pretty serviceable, and you wonder if he got a bit more of the reins where he'd be higher up in dispatches. Toby Green was the other one I thought was pretty quiet, Mac.
Yeah, in fact, he was almost a non-event. I thought he was very disappointing, I think, Pete. I think a good game out of him would have won the game. But, I thought he was very disappointing.
Yeah. So anyway, that was it was a very good game, and Sydney event the week off, which will do them no harm whatsoever. GWS obviously got a backup, which I think might be the difference between them being a genuine flag chance this year, I reckon. And the last game was a bit of a blowout, as predicted by many. The Lions 14-15-99 over Carlton 11-5 71, a lot closer than it should have been. The Lions obviously took their foot off the pedal, and Carlton just got blown away when the game was there to be won.
Well, it was 9-6 to 0-0 with 2.5 minutes to go, and the sadistic side of me was praying that Carlton wouldn't score because it would have been a record low, even including all their VFL days forever. So, but the Buggers kicked 2-1 in 2 minutes and destroyed my hopes of seeing them forever carting 0-0 around for half a game. But look, as somebody said, couldn't happen to a nicer mob. I think they're an arrogant bloody mob, Carlton, and it would have been beautiful for them to be in that position. As it was bad enough.
You talk about Port's depth. I think Carlton are a team that has similar depth issues. I think they rely on a few players, and when those players are held or out or not 100%, Carlton really struggle. And yes, look, they've had a lot of injury concerns in the back half of the season.
Yep.
But the core of their side was there, and they got absolutely pummeled.
Yeah, the one they really missed was Curnow, because I mean, at his best, he is an absolute star. But having said that, other teams have had to make do with players missing, and if you're going to be not good enough with one player missing, then you're not good enough overall. No, but to be 9-6 to 0-0, it's a bit more than one or two players missing, thing.
Yeah, and I reckon Freo would have made a better account of themselves in the finals. They'd be spewing that Carlton got snuck in ahead of them. But an easy one for the Lions, who won it in a canter, and now have to back up against a team who had a pretty tough week, Mac.
Yep.
So, and that's, I think, what I mean about the Giants having to really struggle. The Lions will, they've probably got no injuries or very few injury concerns out of that. They certainly didn't blow themselves out in terms of being a tough game or anything. On the other hand, the Giants had to fight all the way to the finish. So that's going to be a very interesting one, and we might actually. I won't go through the stats for the Lions-Carlton game because it's really quite pointless. Because
it is absolutely
nothing to be gained. What I will go through though is next week's games, and we might just talk about them real quick, Mac. Because they're going to be two interesting ones. Port at home again against a rampant Hawthorn. Hawthorn are favourites quite comfortably in this game, and I think that's well deserved. And I don't think Port have got a show at all in this game. I think they'll get blown out of the water.
Yeah, if we look at our memories back a few weeks ago, Hawthorn they blew Port right out of the water, and with Port made a comeback in the last quarter, and they had about 21 seconds to get 2 goals, and they did, to win by a point, and that won't happen again. And I think Hawthorn are playing even better now than they were playing then, and Port are playing worse than they were playing then. So I'm with you. I don't give Port a chance, but who knows? I mean, they might rise to the occasion, but on what we've seen, what we know, definitely Hawthorn for me.
So we're both picking Port to go out in straight sets again. Surely, Macca, surely that's Ken Hinkley done at Port. Surely it is.
It probably will be. He's been there 13 years. I think it's 13 years. If it's not 13, it's 12. He's had a great knock, and he's... you could say he's put them there and they haven't been good enough, and he's always saying they've got the missing piece. They go getting another missing piece and they get the same results. But they might get rid of him. They probably will get rid of him, but I'm not sure that will benefit them very much at all, Fane. I just don't think they have got quite the team for it.
Yeah. Look, I agree. I think they're almost in a position where they're going to fall off the cliff. They've got that fantastic midfield, and yes, they didn't fire, and they're a bit injured. Like, if Butters is carrying a rib, then he's not going to be 100% next week. Horn, for instance, will probably be back to his best, or back to full fitness. Rosie's the one that's really got to step up. But it's, again, Port Adelaide's inability to score. That they can't put big scores on the board, and I don't see them being able to score enough against Hawthorn to win a match. You know, they'll have to score over 12 goals to beat Hawthorn, and I just don't see them doing it.
And the problem is that the players that they've been relying on, Dixon, I mean, he's been a spent force, I reckon, for a year or two. They still keep playing him. And they've got Marshmallow Marshall, who's as soft as butter, and he might be available for this particular game, but I don't think he'll add much if he does.
I think they've got no choice but to try Marshall. They've got to play Marshall, in my opinion, soft or not, underdone.
Well,
or not.
I agree with you. I do agree with you, because you're talking about in place of Dixon.
No, I'd play them both. You need Dixon there. You need Dixon there to chop out in the ruck. And Chris Scott did very well. He made sure that Blitzars was rucking against Dixon and absolutely destroyed Dixon whenever he went into the middle. But they need that chop out.
Well, he better be good at it, because he doesn't do much else. He only had the 3 possessions for the game, which is very, very ordinary.
Well, either that or they're going to have to play a ruckman up forward. But I just think they need 2 tools up there, as well as Radigalia. I don't think Radigalia offers them anything.
Oh, he was shocking, wasn't he? He was shocking.
Yeah, so, I mean, Dixon, a lot of people don't rate Dixon. I think he's been a pretty good player, pretty good warrior over the journey, but he's done now, surely, and he's got nothing in his legs, and he'll give you 150%, but that's 150% of not much right now.
That's about right, Pete.
Yeah, you know. And the Giants and the Lions, as we've already touched on, the Lions will cruise into this game. It is away from the Gabba. Lions aren't the best travelling team going around, but it's a very similar, in terms of the actual configuration of the oval, it's quite similar. Both of the ovals, Gabba and NG, are quite similar. Used to be called Metricon Stadium, I think, Macca, if that jogs your memory at all.
Oh, that does help. Yep.
But
they played each other.
Sorry, go on.
They played each other twice this year, Pete, and GWS have won both games. Both at Engie, or whatever it is, Engie Stadium, and also up at the Gabba. They've won both times.
Yes.
So I think they'll make it a hat trick.
Right, you're tipping the Giants.
Oh, very much so.
Interesting, Macca. On what basis?
Because I think they're a very good side. I think that Sydney and GWS are the 2 best teams in the competition, and there was only a very, very small margin separating them when they clashed. And I think that GWS will carry that form on. They've only got to carry that same form on, and I think they'll be too good for Brisbane. Brisbane don't play as well away from the Gabba, and as I said, they've met twice this year, and GWS were too good for them even up at the Gabba as well as at their own home ground. So I'm expecting a GWS win.
Fair enough. And someone's just Jake Canty in the YouTube chat's corrected me. Metricon was Gold Coast Stadium. Sorry, my bad. It was just used to be called Giant Stadium. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would put Hawthorn in the same conversation as the Giants and Sydney in terms of being in the best form at this stage of the season, Macca. I think they can do a lot of damage. And really, I mean, I know Port didn't put up a huge challenge, but Geelong, they destroyed Port Adelaide. And they played a brand of football that we're not used to seeing from Geelong. Very fast game of football. So I don't think it's as cut and dried as GWS Sydney. That's just my personal view. The biggest thing that I think worries me from the Lions' perspective is their inconsistency. They have the ability to go missing, and they have the ability to be flaky in front of goals. And
very much so.
If they start missing a few shots, it tends to get in their head. Hitwood and Big Joe aren't the best or most consistent of shots. But if their smalls get involved, Mac, and Cameron hasn't been fantastic over the last month or so, but if their smalls get involved, then it's going to be difficult for the Giants to hold them, I believe. My heart says GWS, my head says the Lions in a squeaker on that one.
No, I've got to go, I would say GWS by about 4 goals.
Very good. All right, so we've spent a bloody bunch of time going through the results. Before we get into Crows news, we do have, I think it's Animal here, wanting to have a chat. So don't forget, people on Discord, if you're in the live studio audience, you can come on and say g'day and give us your 2 cents worth. We'd be happy to have you on. So come on board. Mate, how you going?
Hey, man, how you going?
Good.
Animal.
Good.
Hello. Got the music on. I did ring up to talk about something a little bit on the side, a little bit of a side conversation, but just before I get into that, did you see the photo of the one Crows guy at the Port game on Thursday night?
I did.
Standing up in the crowd celebrating.
Yep. Yeah,
I thought that photo was fantastic.
Very brave, a very brave man, Animal.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Anyway, I wanted to play a little bit of a game of fantasy with you guys. I'm not talking about fantasy football because I don't play that shit, but I'm talking about a fantasy where me, you, and Phoenix, we're all here. Phoenix, Macca, me, Animal here, and we are in charge of the AFL. And we've decided it's not going to be a Victorian-centric organisation, and we're going to try and make it as fair as possible. So I want to present an idea that I think most people with like objective views will agree that the draft isn't really adequate enough to equalise the competition. And the teams that end up down the bottom usually stay there for a long time and have trouble luring talent, even if they're able to pay more than so-called destination clubs, while the bigger clubs end up as the destination clubs and lure the best talent for less. So my idea is to propose a rolling salary cap. Right? So now the figures can be worked out at a later date, but I'm thinking that perhaps a salary cap for each club can be worked out on a yearly basis by an average finishing position over the last 10 seasons, with each position assigned a figure. So not necessarily a ranking where each team's ranked from 1 to 18, but more like your average finishing position. Say you finished over the last 10 years, all your different positions, the average of that is 7.85. So your average finishing position is 8, basically rounded up to 8. Okay. And so most of the clubs will end up in that sort of middle range, but some of those perpetually low finishing clubs will go down lower, and some of those higher finishing clubs will end up with a higher finishing position. So an AFP, for example, average finishing position, if you finish AFP is like 18, you can end up with 16 million. If your AFP is 17, you can end up with 15.75 million, and so on and so forth. And it drops down until you get down to 1, where you're getting about 12 million. Now, I understand the negatives could be added stress and work for the clubs with moving salary caps, and it will be likely difficult to get past the Players Association. But I think the positives might outweigh the negatives. Like, it will promote player movement between clubs. and trades and give lower clubs a real war chest to go after free agents. Also provide an avenue for star players to earn big money that they deserve by moving to lower clubs through free agency. Even though the cap is moving, it's unlikely for clubs to move up and down more than a position or two from year to year because of the 10-year average, and most of the comp will be somewhere in the middle anyway. Also, they'll know within a figure or two what next year's AFP will be, allowing them to plan contract negotiations and trade strategies in advance anyway. Most of the affected clubs will be perpetual high and low achieving clubs like Geelong and Gold Coast, which makes sense. It will make it really easy for clubs attempting a proper rebuild. Let's say you're doing well for a while with a decent team and your AFP is 5, but your team is aging and the lower clubs then poach some of your better players with a lot of big money that you can't afford. So that you end up dropping down the ladder, getting some good lower played talent in the draft. Over the next year, your AFP lowers and your cap, over the next few years, your AFP lowers and your cap goes up, enabling you to pay the talent you've acquired and the money they deserve, and or go after free agents pushing you up the ladder again. Despite the large salary cap gap between 1 and 18, the top and few bottom spots will be seldom used anyway. And with Tasmanian coming in, they can give an AFP of 19, giving them a real chance of building up a competition team right away and learning some great free agents right away without having to compromise the draft as much. I love the competition, but something needs to be done to give all clubs a chance at securing premierships, and a dramatic change like this might be the only way. What do you guys think?
Well,
you go first, Maka.
Yeah, well, basically, you're advocating communism in football. But that's basically basically what it is.
More socialism, but
or socialism rather than communism. No, I'm not for it, and
that's right.
I like your look. I like your motives. But I don't think this is the answer, because it's. I just think it's too much way out there. If I can't see clubs, I can see bottom clubs voting for it, but I can't see why would any club that's doing very well at the moment even support it. Now you're saying the AFL
wouldn't.
You're saying the AFL would make the decision, but the AFL ain't going to burn their bridges either. They've got.
Yeah, of course.
I think it's a good idea, but it's too radical and it's too socialistic. Yeah. And for that reason, I don't think it will ever happen, although I do like it.
So I'd probably challenge a couple of the assertions that you based your premise on. First of all, you said that we wanted it to be a less Vic-centric competition. Well, there's only 4 Victorian teams in the top 8 now, which is pretty decent considering that half of the non-Victorian teams have actually made the 8.
That's true.
And secondly, it's probably one of the most even years that we've had for a while, and we're getting those even years a bit more often. I mean, the Crows finished 15th, and our percentage was nearly 100%. That's almost unprecedented. So I think I actually think the draft and the salary cap are actually doing their jobs. I think the thing that has probably failed or not had the desired outcome is free agency. Because I think the AFL thought that the free agency would feed mature players to clubs at the lower end of the scale in order to give them a bit of a bump up while they're rebuilding. But what's actually happened is the reverse, that experienced players have seen the opportunity to bail out of those struggling clubs in the search of a premiership.
I agree. And so that's kind of what gave me the idea, because I can see they're going more towards this whole free agency model and promoting the player movement. And if they're going to do that, players are going to naturally opt to go to the clubs where the success is. And so I think it's going to get worse as the years go on. These clubs like, North Melbourne are sort of stuck at the bottom. It's going to get harder and harder for them to move up, in my opinion. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, don't forget that Hawthorn were in that position 12 to 18. Hawthorn and Adelaide have been on exactly the same trajectory. And I would argue that
again, they're one of the biggest clubs in the competition, aren't they? With a proven history of success that play.
Not really. They're one of the smaller Victorian clubs. They're not
they've
part of the
definitely had
Big
a
Four in
pretty
Victoria.
good. Yeah, fair enough. But they've definitely had a pretty good run over the last 20 years.
Yeah, but that I don't understand how that
And
assists
that's
them
in the memory
developing.
that's in the memory of the players that are going in there, aren't they? Those players remember the years where the Hawks were the best club in the competition, and it, I think it would affect them, their decision to go there. Don't you think? Do you think that was a lure for players to want to go play for a club like
who
Hawthorn?
have they brought in there that's been an out and out champion?
That's a good point. They've built a great team out of.
The only one was Ginnivan, and he's not a champion. He was on the nose and a young player, like certainly not what I would consider a world-beating player. They haven't really recruited anyone. They got Gunston back on the tail end of his career, but really, that team is all about the list that they've built.
Yeah, they do have 9 players from other clubs in their team, but they have players that are workers. And have been given more opportunity by Hawthorn and played probably in the positions that they should be playing in, and they've been probably surplus to their other club, but they've been top players with Hawthorn. So
I reckon there'll be players that will want to go there now, though.
There will be,
but then the salary cap actually limits that from happening, though, Animal, because not every player that wants to go to Hawthorn can get to Hawthorn. Because Hawthorn might not have the trade capital, or they might not have the list space, or they might not have the salary space.
Yeah, I mean, he's totally right in what he's saying. He is saying that these top players, they're not looking at wanting to go to North Melbourne, for example.
No,
Petrarca.
That's kind of more what it's close to, isn't it?
Petrarca, Petrarca was prepared to leave Melbourne, but he only nominated 2 clubs, Carlton and Collingwood. Neither of them had the trade capital that could possibly make it happen, which he quickly then withdrew his request for a trade.
When you look at the current sides that are down the bottom, Richmond are at the tail end of their window, so they were always going to tank because their players they've seen that squad out. North Melbourne have been an absolute rabble for a number of years, so you would argue that, and they actually have quite a good midfield, and they have a great young lad up forward. Defensively, they probably struggle a bit, but they are certainly, now that they've got themselves organised with a decent coach, they're starting to show signs of improvement. Pardon me. West Coast, West Coast just never recovered from COVID. They had that season where they were decimated with sickness and injuries and players underdone, and I don't think they've ever recovered from that. And I would suggest that once they turn over their list a little bit, and if they can hang on to Harley Reid, for example, that it won't take them long to bounce back to being competitive. The rest, like if you look at the rest of the bottom 8, you've got the Crows who've been on a rebuilding path. Melbourne were in the 8 last year. Gold Coast, but you'd imagine that Hardwick will probably take a bit of a rake through their list over the off season. St Kilda is obviously a perennial loser. Essendon have made the finals for 20 years, but again, a lot of that is driven by off-field mismanagement. Freo and Collingwood. I mean, I don't think you can make equalisation rules that offset poorly run clubs. I think if a club is run poorly, or if they are bad at list management, then they have to wear it. I don't think you can. I don't think you can offset that by saying, "Oh, well, we'll give you an extra $2 million in your
totally agree.
or $5 million."
I agree with what you're saying. I just, like I said, I worry about this free agency model and where it's going, and you're right. This year's definitely sort of proven all that wrong, but at the same time, I think this is a bit of an aberration. I don't feel like it's been as even over the last few years. Like, I know Collingwood did that freak show thing where they won every game by 2 points and still managed to win a flag. But this is not something that happens all the time, is it? But anyway, no, it's just an idea. I thought I'd see what you guys thought of it.
No, we love your input, mate. And look, I definitely think that the free agency thing needs looking at. I don't think it's had the desired outcome. But again, I think, to be honest with you, the only thing I think will actually fix that problem, and probably the more broader problem of good players going to better clubs, is the ability to trade without the players' consent.
Correct.
If you could do that,
I think
if you could,
some power should go back to the clubs for sure.
Yeah, but whether that would, I think that would help. I think a draft lottery would help. So the top 8 spaces in the draft should be a lottery, so that teams don't tank. I think you should be able to trade future pick. They need to trade. They need to open up the ability to trade future picks, a la the NBA, where you can go, more years down the track. They could probably.
But they're doing that next year anyway, aren't they? I think they're bringing in 2 years in advance next year.
Yeah,
but I don't know if they're going to make it possible to trade more than one first round pick, or do you know what I mean? Because you've got to use one every 2 years, don't you?
Wow.
So I don't know if anything.
Theoretically, unless you're Geelong.
Yeah. Or didn't Port get away with it in the Horn Francis deal as well?
They got permission. Yeah,
they got away with it.
Yeah.
I didn't mind that so much though, because Horn Francis was basically a first round pick the year before anyway.
Well, yeah. I mean, that was. The AFL always had to sign off that deal. It's not like Port was losing out on it, that's for sure. Anyway,
very good, mate.
Thanks for the chat.
Interesting
Hope you guys are well.
We are very well,
mate.
thank you, mate. Thanks for listening.
Nice.
Cheers, mate. All right, Macca. News around the club, and I've probably forgotten a fair bit, so feel free to fill me in. The tangible ones are Thilthorpe re-signing until 28, or extending until 28.
Correct.
That's the only tangible contract move that I've
Rankin
heard of. Oh, Rankin extended.
Yep. Ferry.
Yes, I think we reported on that a couple of weeks ago, though.
Yeah, I'm just running through them all at the moment. This thing.
Yeah, so Berry's on for another 2.
Yeah.
So we haven't had any word on Mark Keane yet.
Well, look, interesting one. No, we haven't. Well, no, the club is saying that they've been reassured by Mark he's staying with them, but of course that won't actually be valid until he comes back. Collingwood are trying to lure him, but they offered more money, and now we've offered more money above that again. So I would think that unless. If that's the end of the story, he'll come back to Adelaide. And he is contracted, so he's not going to be... Adelaide are going to dig their heels and not allow it to happen because Collingwood had him for 3 years and they only played 21 to 23. And they only gave him 5 games in the period, 2021, 22, in those 3 years. So... And yet he played with us, and I think he played 18 games with us in 1 year. So I think we've given him a very good opportunity, and I think there's a mountain of improvement in him. So I don't want to lose him.
Well, you're not going to, because like you said, he's contracted for next year.
Yep. But the point is we're trying to extend his contract for a longer period.
Yeah. So the rookie list is Will Hamill and is it Himmelberg?
Yeah, Himmelberg. This is uncontracted list.
No, rookie list. Rookie list.
I don't know who's on the rookie list. I don't think it really matters these days because they can move them around backwards and forwards.
Well, yeah, but they've got to make room. So they've got to, if, for example, they wanted to drop Brodie Smith back to the rookie list, they'd have to elevate one of those blokes already on the rookie list, or else they'd have to delist them. That's why I'm asking.
Your point is 100% valid. unfortunately, I don't know who's a rookie these days and who's not.
Yeah, I'm just having a look. Look at good old Footy Wire, although it's not 100% accurate, I don't think. Yeah. No, it doesn't denote. It used to tell you if it was a rookie or not.
No, it doesn't make it. It doesn't differentiate.
So Hamill's uncontracted, Sloan's uncontracted, Parnell's uncontracted, McHenry's uncontracted, Lockie Gallant's uncontracted, James Borlace, I think, got extended, did he?
Well, that's an interesting one. I was going to raise him because one reporter reported that he had signed a 2-year extension.
Yeah, but nothing from the Crows.
I've seen nothing announced by the club at all, and I've never seen it said by any other reporter. So I don't know whether he has or whether he hasn't.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen anything either. So not sure about Borlace. Hugh Bond, despite playing the last few games, has not re-signed. Elliot Himmelberg also contract up. And Brodie Smith, although it says here 24, he triggered an extension for another year, so he's going around again. I thought Himmelberg still had a year to go as well. But anyway, so there's a bit there. But
if we get rid of...
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, if we get rid of 5, Fiend, who are the 5 that you'd move?
Well, you're not going to get rid of 5. You're not going to get rid of 5. And I think it's too early to speculate.
Oh, no, it's pure speculation because you don't know what trade's going to happen, etc., etc.
Yeah. Obviously, there's going to have to be a spot made for Neil Bullen. You would think that he would come on. What do you think is a fair and reasonable trade for Neil Bullen, Mac?
28 years of age. Probably, if we were trading him out, we'd probably be asking for a second rounder. I'd be trying to get him for a third, but we may have to pay a second rounder for him. How do you see him?
I might give him a future second. But in this draft, I probably would think a third rounder.
Well, we've got pick 42, which is probably at the lower end of the third round, like 18 and around 36, so pick 6 type thing. So, yeah, I'd certainly be trying to get away with pick 42.
Well, it's a reasonably strong draft, and I just wonder whether, given the strength of the draft, etc., whether a second round pick would be just a little bit high, mate.
Well, I think it is a little bit high, but that's what they'll as I said, they'll be probably asking for a second round, and I'll be trying to get it for a third.
Yeah, well, we've got, what have we got? We've got, obviously, pick 4, 25, 42, 60, 78, 96, 114. I think 25 is far too high.
Yeah, I agree with you. It definitely is.
So it either has to be a future second or a third rounder, 42.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
No, I totally support it, and I'd keep pick 25. Definitely keep pick 25.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of scuttlebutt around about player movements and all the rest of it, and I think it's too soon to talk too much about that, but we might just cover off the people that we know are on the radar. Without getting into the weeds too much about it, because there are a couple of key teams that are still playing, and obviously that has an impact on announcements and whatnot. The big one, I guess, May, is Lukosius.
Well,
there
are rumours of a bigger one.
If I could just finish my sentence, my my understanding is that Hardwick has given him leave to look around for opportunities, but they're happy to keep him. You would think that they would restructure his deal if they kept him, but I would say that he's out of there. Question is where, Mac?
Well, he'll definitely be leaving because if he were at a club and the coach has said that they're happy for you to look around and find another club, you wouldn't really feel like you were totally wanted. And if Location's got any brains, he would then be looking around for a club who would want him.
Well, I mean, I'd feel very wanted at $800,000 a season. I'd be happy to play VFL at that rate.
Yeah, well, he has got that option. And if it goes higher than that in the last couple of years of the contract, it goes up to over the mill, apparently. But look, there are takers for him. It's a matter of what you have to go give to get him. Adelaide are one of the clubs that are after him. Port Adelaide, the club he probably fits into best was probably Port Adelaide because he wants to play forward, and they're quite weak up forward. So, in terms of they need him a lot more than we need him. In fact, I'm not sure that we actually need him. I don't know what your thoughts are. I'm not locations mad. If I would get him, if you got him for a reasonable figure, because you're taking on a large salary, yes, maybe, but I wouldn't be busting my gut for him.
I don't think we've adequately replaced Shane McAdam in that third tall, medium tall thing, or that Tom Lynch role, if you like. And I think Lockie Gallant was probably earmarked as that player. Lockie's had a pretty stunted time of it, but he's still young. And I think he's got some good traits, Lockie Gallant. With Jack Lukosius, you know what you're going to get in terms of his silky skills and all that sort of stuff. Not the hardest at it player you've ever seen in your life.
That's my one little niggle.
But not every player needs to be a Bulldog. Not every player needs to be a Bulldog, Macca. As long as players go when they have to go. We've had this discussion with Rochelle. Not every player needs to be Patrick Dangerfield, but there have been times where you could question whether Lukosius has gone when he should have gone. Look, don't discount him moving to Victoria, because I think there'd be some clubs in Victoria that would be quite happy to have Lukosius on their books. I think he would be a very good foil for Larky at North Melbourne. I think he'd be very handy at St Kilda. There are clubs, and I think even Melbourne would probably have a sniff, to be honest with you. I think there are clubs there that would be into him. My biggest thing is, though, that I don't think Gold Coast have played this very well, Mac, because he's on a back-ended contract. So, as you rightly point out, he's on the higher section of his contract over the next 2 years or 1 year or whatever it is.
2.
Yeah. So why would he leave? Why would he leave for anything other than an equal or better deal?
I think he will leave, but as long as he doesn't care who pays it, as long as he gets the same money. In other words, maybe Gold.
And I guess that's what I'm getting at. Whoever takes him on is going to have to take on the salary, or Gold Coast are going to have to keep paying a fair chunk of the salary. So, and I just think Gold Coast have backed themselves into a bit of a corner on this one, because I would have thought the whole idea of getting Lukosius to look around was to get his salary off your books. But at the end of the day, I think they're going to be stuck paying a fair bit of it, or taking nothing for him, in a bit of a reverse Jack Bowes situation.
Yeah, I think I think one of the reasons that Adelaide, if he wanted to come here, would be in a very, very good position to get him, Dean, was the fact that we have got a lot of cap space and we do have the capacity to absorb his full wage. We could take him and pay less to Gold Coast for him because we could take the whole salary and not ask them to supplement part of it.
But why would we want to?
That's whether we rate him highly enough to get him.
Well, but why would you make him your highest paid player?
Well, I'm saying I wouldn't. I'm just saying, but that's one of the. I'm saying that if Adelaide did that, that would give them the greatest advantage.
But I don't. Well, all right, obviously, but I don't think there's a world in which Adelaide would be justified to take on all his salary at the expense of other people coming in. And don't forget, we've got young players that are going to be turning over their contract in the next 2-3 years that are going to need a bump up in salary. Yes, I know we've got a bit of room, but I just don't see on current form that Jack. I mean, let's face it, Jack Lukosius has got a contract befitting of a top 5 draft pick, which he was, and he probably hasn't come on as expected, giving that status, that high status. So his next contract is not going to be that unless things change. He's not an 8 or 900,000 a year player. So his next contract's going to be around about the 600, 650, unless things change and his form improves or whatever. So why as Adelaide would you take him on a 2-year deal at 900,000? I don't think you would. And Jack wouldn't take it unless you offered that. So I think he'll stay put. Because I know as I've reported on this show before, I know he loves it up there. He is very embedded in Gold Coast. He loves it up there.
Well, he may well love it up there, Bean, but the coach has really, in a way, said, I don't really need you.
He's getting $1 million a year, Macca. The ball's not in his court. He can say, fine, don't pick me. I'll take my $1 million a year. He doesn't have to look. If Gold Coast, this is the way I'd play it if I was Jack Lukosius. I'd be saying, if you don't want to pay me $1 million a year to play in the VFL and you don't want to pick me in the AFL team anymore, then you go and find me a club. And if I'm happy with that club, then I'll consider it. I wouldn't be bloody looking at all if I was Jack Lukosius.
Well, I'm not Lukosius, and I don't know how he thinks. But if I know if it was me and I was in that situation and I had the guarantee of still having my salary, I would be looking around.
That's the thing. You don't.
No, well, I wouldn't move unless I did.
Well, and that's exactly what I'm saying to you, Macca. But it wouldn't be up to you to find that deal. It's up to Gold Coast to find that deal, as far as I'm concerned.
That may well be the case, but I still think that one way or the other, I don't think he will be there next year.
Yeah, I think unless I could see Port Adelaide wanting to do the deal, but Port Adelaide seem to have a lot of irons in the fire considering their fairly weak draft hand and their trade collateral. So I don't know how they would be able to do what they needed to do to get that done.
Well, that's one of the reasons why Port Adelaide every year try and move a player on, because they're always spending their future to get this missing piece, and it doesn't work out. And the next year it's been aim on, and if you go through it every year, they move a player on, and I think they were prepared to sacrifice Houston this year, but Houston's talking about staying, which might bugger up their trade plans.
Well, and this is, I mean, again, I don't think they played that hand very well. Because Houston,
they haven't.
I think Houston would happily move back to Victoria for the right price. But what they've done by doing it the way that they have is basically allowed him to say, well, no, I want to stay, which means that they're going to have to work harder to get rid of him, and they're probably not going to get the deal that they wanted to get.
Correct. I think it has failed up for them.
Yeah. So, and I think it's similar with Lukosius. I think they've messed up by doing what they did. I think that they should have probably let Jack drive the situation, but by dropping him and giving him leave to look around and all the rest of it, when he's got 2 years of a back-ended contract, there's no motivation for him to leave whatsoever. Because if he stays, if they can't do a deal with anyone and he stays, they're almost obliged to play him, because it would be such a massive waste of money running around in the VFL that they're almost obliged to play him. I'd be, if I was Jack Lukosius, I'd be forcing their hand.
Look, what you said I think is very accurate, and for that very reason is the reason I think that he will be moving, that they are very confident that he'll move. Otherwise, what you said comes into play. So I think the very fact that the coach was prepared to come out and say what he did, I think he's very confident that he'll move.
No, I think Hardwick can be quite belligerent, Macca. I think it's exactly the sort of thing Hardwick could come out and say without considering the ramifications.
Well, time will tell. But my guess is, whether it be your reasons, my reasons, or none of them, I still think he will move.
So do you think Adelaide, or do you think somewhere else?
Adelaide have made it very clear they would like him. They made it very clear, and they're chasing hard. And the rumours when you watch shows like Gettable and other shows like that on AFL, etc., they're saying that Adelaide are the front runners for that. But that means bugger all when it comes down to when it really happens. It could be, as you said, any one of the Victorian teams as well. So we certainly are after him. Whether we get him, who knows?
Well, I think we're probably interested in him. I don't think we're necessarily after him. I mean, there's been reports that Nix went up during the season to talk to Jack, but that hasn't been verified. But it's pure speculation.
No, that's been absolutely reiterated time after time that Nix did have that conversation with him.
By who?
By many a reporter, not just one, by many. And
it's all like someone says it and the rest just pile on.
Maybe. But the point I'm
have you not learnt not to trust those reporters? Last year, Sam Eben had Jordan Dawson, or the year before last, had Jordan Dawson going categorically to Port Adelaide. Do you remember what happened?
Oh, that was never going to happen. I thought he was wrong, yeah. But
you didn't know it was never going to happen at the time because we talked about it. And my point is that those reporters often speculate based on the balance of probabilities, and it's often wrong. Some of the stuff that Ralphie's come out with on Twitter in the last week or so, I'm wondering whether he's okay. Poor old Ralphie.
Well, coming back to Lukosius, I'm not fanatical about him, but I think the club are more fanatical about him than I am. And I think the reason for that is that this next year will definitely be Tex Walker's last year, and they've said that as part of that contract he may or may not be playing all the games. Well, he certainly won't be playing the away games, they said. And I think where Lukosius works in our forward line is that Fogarty becomes Walker, and Lukosius becomes the third tall. In other words, Fogarty moves up a notch as the main man up forward. Phil Thorpe's the big tall one close to goal, and Lukosius is the one leading around the ground. So
don't like Tyler Welsh.
He'll take time, mate. I've watched these tapes, and he's not going to be ready, I don't think, for another year or two.
Don't like Lockie Gallant?
No, I don't. I don't think Lockie tries hard, but I think he's not the answer.
Don't like Lockie Murphy?
Well, I think Adelaide should give a draft pick attached to him to somebody to take him. I mean, seriously, the old goat picture joke comes into vogue because There's no logical reason why he's in that team.
Look, I think, to be perfectly honest with you, Jack Lukosius coming in as our third tall on that salary, given his limitations, I think is a massive stretch. And unless you've got designs on Jack Lukosius being a hard running midfielder or a wingman or something like that, I just don't feel like we have any need for him. And as I said at the top of the show, if we're not spending all our moments thinking about how we're going to get good midfielders into this club, either by way of the draft or by trade, then we're wasting our time. And to me, the Dawson trade was a very good trade. The Rankin trade was a very good trade. The Lukosius situation doesn't interest me, and that's nothing against Jack. I think he'd be a decent player in the right club. I just don't think that we have a need for him, and we've got bigger fish to fry.
Well, I can't argue about that point. I mean, and really, it should be midfielder. But of course, they've got to be available. That's the only drawback. I mean, pick four must be. They cannot be used for anything other than drafting a quality midfielder. And if they do, I think we should bloody get all right and burn down the club and sack the people and all the rest of it. I mean, it just cannot be burnt for a player that's not a midfielder. It has to be. We must get midfielders into the club, and you're quite right, Thane. It should be our number one priority. I don't care if we do Lukosius as an extra one, but as long as our main purpose is to get midfielders.
Yeah, and I'm not going to reiterate my previous stuff about what's been said to me about what they think of the Adelaide Football Club. I think the situation is probably a little bit different now, because previously Jack probably would have, and Jack's family probably would have felt that they had the upper hand in terms of moving if they wanted to move, whereas now, as you point out, Macca, it's more of a situation of him being forced out, if that's the case, which means that he's probably can be less precious about the options that he's prepared to look at. But having said that, I think if there were two options in South Australia of equal merit, I know which one he'll take.
Yeah. What about Roses, who is the other one from Gold Coast? It's been told that he is quite free to look around and find himself another club.
Not interested.
Well, I'm in the same boat as you, but apparently, again, our club is. But I would be if they said.
But where are you reading that? Where are you reading that, Macca?
I read a lot of stuff, and I can't tell you specifically where I read all these things because I read a lot. But,
well, I would say anything that appears on Big Footy is worth ignoring. And the only place that I've seen that is on Big Footy.
I don't read Big Footy.
So, look, this is what I mean. I don't want to get too much in the weeds because it's just pure speculation at this stage. And, we're so far away from trade week and all that. What I'm really keen on is to see what the club does in terms of delistings. Because I think that will inform us as to the type of targets that we're looking at. It does bother me a little bit that Lockie Gallant is uncontracted, which means that we may think we're in with a sniff or sniffing around with Lukosius, because that would seem an obvious replacement. I can't believe that they coached Brodie Smith to an extension. I just can't believe it.
That's disgraceful.
And if it's so that he could be a leader to our younger players and he's already prepared to pay a lot of SANFL, we could have delisted him and picked him up as an SANFL player anyway. So that's got bloody whiskers on it. Tex, I'm interested in your opinion, Macca, because to my way of thinking, if a player can't be available for 23 home and away games, then he doesn't deserve a spot on a professional AFL list.
Well, you're 100% right, of course. It's called about being a team, and a team and you've got to have team members that play equal shares and pull their weight equally. And the fact that you're saying, well, yeah, but we'll make an exception for him, I don't think that doesn't sit very well with me.
No, me either, and it smacks again of poor list management, and inability to make hard decisions, and the tail wagging the dog. And that's all due respect to Tex Walker, who's been a wonderful player for our club. Wonderful player. No problems whatsoever with
One of our
Tex's
greatest ever.
contributions to our club. But players don't know often when to call it quits, and it often takes clubs to tell them. And in this circumstance where we're basically burning a pick on a player that can play half a season at most, because let's not forget he might do his back in round one and that might be the end of it, or his hip or whatever else he's carrying around. To me, that's just poor list management, particularly during this time where we need to continue to refresh our list and to try and find new talent.
Yeah, look, you've often said that, we'll never be any good until we get rid of all the old 2017 mob.
Correct.
And unfortunately, there are two of them that they're on there, and I agree that Smith should not be on there. And if the Tex contract is as they say, that he's not going to play away games and he's only available for half a season, well, I think that's wrong too. So it would have been nice to have had a clean sweep and have all the past swept away and all with the new players.
Yeah, 100%. So I don't like the way that those situations have been managed. I'm actually dumbfounded that they literally coached Brodie Smith into a contract trigger when he was playing worse than a Z-grade amateur footballer. They picked him for weeks and weeks when he was clearly out of form, didn't deserve to be picked, and there were players in the twos that could have replaced him, and as a result, and the moment he hit a trigger, they don't play him anymore. What does that tell you, Macca?
Well, to me, it just shows me that there's some very idiotic people making that decision.
What it shows me is they did it on purpose so that there could be no argument.
I agree with that, but they have consciously given him a trigger.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Trigger.
And they've done it on purpose so that there can be no argument.
I did see an interview with Smith, and he's obviously been told he could be playing some SAFL football next year as well, because he was being congratulated on his new contract and that, and you're looking forward to next year, blah, 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 the usual stupid questions. And amongst it, he said, I am looking forward, be that SAFL or AFL. So he's obviously been told that he may well be playing SAFL football as well.
Yeah. So why bother?
Well, you shouldn't bother. I mean, it's quite stupid, but they have bothered.
Sam in the YouTube chat says, do people reckon Brodie Smith is cooked or just had a bad year? I think he's been on a downhill spiral since about 2021, and I think he's cooked.
Absolutely cooked. Yeah. He as a footballer, he's got a lot to say off the field, obviously, but on the field, you can only go by what you see, and his best has been gone for about 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I think so. So, there's a fair bit to play out in terms of our list. There's a lot to speculate on, but I think, we'll probably leave that for later shows, Mac. We've been going for over 2 hours, which is our maximum. Yeah, well, you just keep talking. So.
Yeah, it's always me, isn't it?
So, look, I appreciate everyone who's tuned in on Discord and on YouTube tonight. It's been a pretty good turnout considering there's precious little Crows action at the moment. Apologies for the chat. I'll get that fixed next week so we can all interact across all platforms. Thank you to those who, it was J&M and it was Ben, who